have a lawyer on the show. I am so excited to have a lawyer on the show to ask all of my dumb legal questions too. Stephen Beer is a partner in the New York office of Lewis Brisbois and the national chair of the firm's entertainment, media, and sports practice. He concentrates his practice on film, television, and music, and he represents industry-leading film, television, and music companies and has acted as counsel to numerous award-winning writers, directors, producers, and multi-platinum musical artists. And so because Stephen regularly negotiates rights deals for film and TV projects, he's exactly who we want to talk to and ask all of our questions about contracts and rights, particularly as it relates to filmmakers independently releasing their film. And then separately and personally, I'm just a big fan of Stephen and been so grateful to the advice and support that he's given me in my life and career over the past decade plus. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Christy. It's great to be here.
So can you dig in a little bit more into your work just to kind of set the stage so we know where you're coming from? Do you work mostly with bigger studios? Yeah. Do you work with independents? Who are your clients?
So, although the practice is a national practice and our team is based in LA, Nashville, and New York, I live in New York. I practice in New York, and I love independent films, and I spend most of my time working on independent film projects.
Okay, cool. And so when does an independent filmmaker typically engage you, or when is the best time in general to engage a lawyer?
Typically, it's well before the distribution process because you really should be thinking about distribution questions at the very beginning of your development because how you distribute your film informs the kind of film that you're making, how you're going to market it, and presumably immediately, and the questions that you should be asking your counsel in terms of aligning with kinds of deals that you intend to do. And so at the very beginning of the process, you should be thinking about what your priorities are. And then a lawyer can help you stay focused on that and make sure that you're reserving rights, securing rights, and comporting yourself as if you're going to be distributing with a certain game plan right from the beginning.
And so, can you walk us through an example of that? So, if I'm if I have a script and I'm putting together talent, if I have a documentary film because I found a story, do I come to you and I'm like, I don't know yet what my distribution is, or am I coming to you and saying, I really want to sell this to Netflix, or because I feel like when we talk to filmmakers, it's always I would love to sell to Netflix, but also if I don't, here's my plan B and C.
In today's world, and I've been doing this for a while, Plan B is really Plan A, and that's a good thing because that allows our clients, our filmmaking friends, to have more flexibility, a lot more options. And let's face it, the marketplace has really changed over the last few decades, especially in the last decade. You don't want to be dependent or overly reliant on a traditional model for distribution that if you look through your rear view mirror or side view mirror, that model is getting smaller and smaller. And where you really need to have your focus is through the windshield. And if you have a periscope, maybe even around the corner. So having that mindset of flexibility, that plan B being a plan A really makes a lot of sense.
And do you typically guide filmmakers through that process? So if they're coming to you and saying, this is my somewhat plan A, or this is my budget, and I have this set budget because I'm hoping to get this distribution deal, or I'm planning to self-distribute or to do independent distribution. So here's my budget. Do you guide them through that budget process or more just through the contract stage?
I guide them in a way that we're vested in our client's success. So if we see them on the road and they're going to a place that used to exist but has been closed down, or maybe it's just a vestige of what used to be the promised land, we're going to say something and ask them to take a step back. But the most important thing is at the very beginning, especially for the less experienced producers and filmmakers, is to consider what the priorities are. What are your goals? What kind of film are you making? A documentary it can be very different than dramatic narrative. For many documentary filmmakers, they're really focused on impact and eyeballs, impressions, and changing the world. And I love that. But that's a different model. And there's plenty of overlap, but one needs to really understand what the priority is. Could be ROI, return on investment, especially where you have investors that are seeking to leverage this film in the marketplace and make their money back and then some. And then invest in other film projects. So having that clarity at the very beginning is really important. So we like to make sure that that's registered with our clients.
That makes sense. And so when you're putting together these agreements, are you putting them, are these, this is where, forgive me, as someone who's not a filmmaker and as someone who's definitely does not have a law degree, do you put together, you're putting together the contracts for production and then are you also helping set up like the cameras and the waterfall and how like the payouts and all of that will happen? And then do you also work on the distribution deals?
Yeah, so the specific elements of a distribution agreement are the mechanics are down the road, but it's at the very beginning where the investors want to know that there is a arm's length objective repository where the funds are going to be sent so that and that happens certainly the talent representatives and managers and the agents want that too. So a CAMA is something that even though we speak about CAMAs um, and that's something that we normally think about in the latter stages, backloaded, it's actually a front loaded matter because the talent and investors want that. It's actually, I just want to add, actually a really
Yeah.
good thing for the producer too, because when the time comes and you're sitting down with your distribution company, you'd really like to make sure that the monies, your sales revenues are being sent, are being allocated directly to the CAMA as well. And that's with respect to the sub distribution companies. If you have enough leverage and you can lean into your distributor to make sure that their sub distributors send the money straight to the CAMA instead of to the distributor directly.
So what's an example of that? If so, if like if is a distributor, let's say like an aggregator or maybe someone like Giant, and then they're putting it on the platforms instead of having the money come from Apple or Amazon to the distributor, it would go straight to the CAMA.
That's the goal. And you can only do
Okay.
that where you have leverage. But I see that more and more. That's something that we're trying to negotiate because it's really hard. In many instances, distributors are have not been dutiful at sending out their reports and statements on a regular basis and are not always paying it. And then when they do give you your reports, you don't always get the appropriate documentation to substantiate what you're getting, like what expenses have been deducted from gross receipts. And I think you really want to have that because you owe that transparency to your investors.
So we've been talking to two different companies. We meaning both like on this podcast and through Kinema, Film Chain and Title Pool. Are you familiar with either of those?
I'm familiar with them, yeah.
So we're looking at for us as Kinema tying in directly to their system. Right now, we have payouts go through Stripe, and it's all very transparent. It doesn't hit our bank account; it goes straight to the filmmaker's account. But we're getting more and more requests of can it connect to their camera. So this is coming from great lawyers like you, helping advise them on a better way of kind of tracking that revenue with more clarity and transparency. Does that sound right?
Yes, it does sound right. And that's really what you want to do as the distribution models evolve. Transparency is not something that really is something that we saw a lot of in the past. But with leverage and as technology becomes more available, like with Film Chain, you've got the technology where it's much easier to do because you've got blockchain. Communication of information is so easy, it's seamless.
It's crazy. Yeah, I've seen some of the tech on both the companies behind the scenes, and it's basically once you set up the contract, like as you so you're setting up the contract, I guess, or you understanding that as legal on this, the waterfall of it, and then plugging it into a technology that'll have it go automatically. So if it's coming from transactional VOD or subscription VOD or education, it'll then the money or the percentage will flow to the right person. It takes a lot of legal upfront to set that up, right? I'm assuming it's a lot of time.
It does, but the real hard work happened about 5 years ago when these companies were getting set up, and that took not only some systems innovation, but also some selling into the marketplace because we were used to certain collection account companies, but then when you have the technology that can, like a film chain, then it's much more practical for the producers because you get to see everything,
Mhm.
but the distributors are not always excited about that because it's just it's a sea change in the way they've been handling their business for forever.
Yeah, it's I think distributors, some are doing well. Many have been struggling for a bunch of different reasons. Some I think maybe to their fault, but much is responding to what's happening in the market. But I've talked to a lot of filmmakers in the last year where their distributor has shut down. And so now they're trying to figure out how do they get their rights back, or where did the film go, or if they distribute separately, are they going to be in violation of contract? So what have you seen in the last couple of years? Either how have you advised filmmakers, or how would you advise them moving forward if this were to happen to them?
Of course, and this is really set forth in the negotiation of the distribution deal, where if there are material terms and there are defaults and they fail to cure the default within an appropriate specified time period, there's an automatic termination and the rights automatically revert back to the producer. That's something that you want to negotiate, but that is not always, in the tug of war between producers and distributors, they don't always like that. But to really battle against this wave of insolvencies and bankruptcies, you'd be remiss if you didn't insist on a termination upon missing a material deal point, like getting your statements on a timely basis. If they miss that, you send them a notice to cure and they fail, then
Mm.
there's an automatic termination. Or if the company is insolvent or bankrupt, it gets complicated with bankruptcy because that's under federal bankruptcy law and there are preferences. But if a company looks like it hasn't been paying their bills on a timely basis, then you can trigger the termination clause. And not only are you getting your rights back, but you're getting your materials back too, which is really important. You want your trailer back. You want your artwork back so that
Oh,
you can pivot to another company. Because if you're stuck in quicksand, in distribution quicksand, then you've really imperiled the momentum of your project. You want to avoid that.
yes. Yeah, again, I talked to a filmmaker yesterday where he was saying his film was up on all the platforms and he hasn't seen a dime. And he's trying to figure out how does he get it back, or could he just release separately, or is he going to get in trouble?
But that also goes to what I was referencing before, Christy, with the sub distributors, because the one of the first things that a distribution company will do is they'll reach out to sub distributors, perhaps on a territory basis, but even just focusing on the US. Um, those sub distributors typically will report to the distributor. And we don't want to see that because then that all that money is going to quicksand and you don't have contractual privity with those sub distributors. So what you really want to do at the contract place is to make sure that you do and to build in an assignment from the get-go with the sub-distributors. You want to be able to approve the sub-distributors and be on the contract for them so that in the event the distribution relationship is terminated, the monies will go to you instead of the creditors in bankruptcy.
Mm. Oh, that makes sense. You mentioned something earlier, but it's easier to achieve these things in your contract when you have leverage, right? And it seems like oftentimes filmmakers are just excited to get distribution or excited to have this opportunity that they might not feel like they have that leverage. What is that leverage, or how do you create that leverage to feel like you can ask for these things, or is there no risk? It doesn't hurt to ask for it.
Well, leverage is another way to say control. And in today's marketplace, there are many more options. And for a producer, one should not just jump in with the only with the distributor that's offering you the most money, or one of the only ones that's offering you a marketing fund. I mean, it's exciting to have a name brand distribution company, but there's a price to pay for that as well. And if you're looking at a traditional distribution model, and I'm not sure that's the best case for every film in today's world. It's not a one size fits all marketplace. There are a lot of hybrid options, many more options available to producers today than before. But if you're looking at a traditional model, then you may be in a better situation. You may have more leverage and more control or ability to negotiate control terms where you're not asking for an MG, a minimum guarantee, or an advance, or you're not asking for a lot of marketing money. In fact, the more you bring to the table, a great film, but also perhaps marketing dollars, and maybe you're leveraging a service arrangement, then you're really in a much better place of control, and you're reserving rights, and you just have much greater flexibility in a very dynamic marketplace. That's something that we really try and counsel to our clients.
I completely agree. Some of the work we did at Picture Motion. I was chatting with the filmmaker last night. She's seeking distribution for a film that's still work in progress. And she's got a network. She's got a podcast. She has influencers. I'm like, package that up. That is control. That is power. I'm like, put that, like, that should be in a deck. Like, you're coming with your own marketing engine. That's very valuable.
One of the opportunities in the marketplace exists because some of the better companies, unfortunately, some of the more experienced companies haven't made it through the difficult time. COVID was a real, it really shuffled the deck for the entire industry, but it really thinned out and shook out. There was a market shakeout. But there were some very good people that worked with those companies, and they have since reorganized and set up new companies that I think have more equitable arrangements. That's a generalization. I'm not going to get into any specific names here, but the point is that there are many more options today than there were 30 years ago when I first started representing filmmakers for production and for distribution. And there was a time years ago where I actually represented films for sale too. I don't do that anymore, but I do look carefully at the nuanced marketplace, and I see that it is swinging more in the direction of filmmakers and producers.
I was totally going to ask you if you could give me specific names, so I'll lay you off the hook for that one. But can you tell me, like, there's a lot of fear, right? Like, for you go out as you take your film at the festival circuit, you of course want to have some distribution offers. We're seeing more and more of this, the hybrid distribution, where filmmakers have control over their release. So we're seeing similar things. It's kind of the space we work in, but we get a lot of questions about what are there any risks doing in-person screenings during festival? Do you risk losing an opportunity for getting a distribution offer? Or can you do virtual events while before the film goes on SVOD? Are there things to avoid?
And so we're really talking about, in this case, we're talking about windows and sequencing. And I'm glad that you mentioned festivals because for most films, a festival, a robust festival calendar can be a lot more rewarding, a lot less expensive, a lot more meaningful than the typical small screen, modest theatrical distribution. And that's for the majority of films. The challenge there is that the festival circuit could take even longer than a year, depending on
Mm,
when you get into it. And if your film is really tracking, there's going to be great demand. And what you want to do is really play to that. And your festivals are a very prime partner. Partnership is extremely important. There are some festivals that don't want you to do private screenings and community screenings. They don't want you to rush your non-theatrical. They really want opportunities. And so they would really prefer that the screening at their festival is precious, and it's
mm.
this is the only place where their audience can see the film. There's a certain exclusivity element to that. So that's the trick behind there are people that will have screenings concurrent with festivals, but there are festivals out there that won't screen you, that won't program you if you're already going to direct to consumer options.
And so if you, let's say, these are the big festivals I'm listing, of course, but you premiere at Sundance and then you think you're going to get into the New York Film Festival. You probably shouldn't do a screening in New York. But after you've premiered at Sundance, you could potentially do an in-person screening in Utah or elsewhere in Utah or near Sundance or Salt Lake City because there may not be another festival in that market. You already had your Utah premiere.
Sure, regional exclusivity is something that is relevant too, for sure.
Okay. And then the other question we get similar to that is there's a fear of overexposure. If my film is overexposed, if it's too many festivals or too many screenings, or if I do one online virtual event and 1,000 people come, distributors have said, or we've heard this, that no, we can't take that film because we don't, the sales agents think they can't sell it and distributors don't want to buy it because they've already tapped out the audience. Have you seen that to be true, or what do you know of
Well,
these rumors?
I've seen that. I think that's an old world issue and something that I don't think really makes a lot of sense. Those distributors, if they really, if they really valued the film, they would be having those conversations closer to the premiere and the first festivals, and not
Mhm.
wait until after the festival circuit. And you don't really need those distribution partners anymore when there are many more hybrid style partnerships where you can work with service partners and really accomplish all of those goals. So if you're looking at, you have to really decide what lane you want to be in. But the traditional lane, which is the one in which we grew up, that's not I think it's antiquated, and it disregards a lot of the opportunities in the digital marketplace, and with programs like Kinema and others, because it's all about community. If you can bring community and have a talk back like you can at a festival, and you can recreate that elsewhere, I mean, that's really the power of screening your independent film. It's not just putting it out there where you don't get any feedback. You really want be in a community. You really want to connect with people. You have a documentary and you want impact. You really want to know that it's registered. You're a filmmaker trying to really establish a brand for yourself. You want a great Q&A, and you want to make a connection with an audience, because um, one screening's audience member is next picture's investor, or viral fan,
Mm-hmm.
digital fan advocate. So I think that connectivity is something that you really want to do. But the point is that the very beginning, one should be thinking plan B as a plan A. It's that it requires some innovation, but if you have a good representative and all the resources like the distribution playbook that you had seen in Spark have created, that what an open source, tremendous open source resource that is. And I think that there are a lot of supportive people in the community that can show you that there is a vast, exciting world where you have more control, more flexibility, more connectivity outside the traditional distribution model. Like I like the traditional distribution model for many films, but there are quite a few where you cannot despair. You really should be counting on that. Um, that should be your plan B. You should be counting on a plan B model, and preparing for success with that, with marketing activities that involve partnerships and digital outreach. So that's we really would try and counsel our clients do that. Now I know we don't have a lot of time, so I do want to talk quickly about some of the mistakes that people make in the
That was
traditional
gonna be my
model,
next
if that's
question.
okay
Yes, that's
with you.
exactly it. Please go in. Tell us everything.
So I've been doing this for a long time, and so I'm going to try not to get too emotional about this, but I've seen a lot of mistakes happen over the years. There are times where I'm brought in to negotiate a distribution deal, and I wasn't really involved, or I'm brought in to untangle a knot because someone did not bring a specialist, a distribution specialist, or an entertainment attorney to negotiate the distribution deal. Those deals are complicated. They are sometimes created to look very friendly, but negotiating a distribution deal without a specialist counsel or on your own is like taking the SATs without a tutor. You need to do that. You need to prepare for that. It's its own language. So one of the common mistakes that I've seen is where a producer, a licensor, has licensed the film for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. If they put a little money on the table, it's not uncommon to see a 15, 20-year term. But oftentimes in the first 2 years, you can see whether or not that partner is responsible. So at the very beginning, whether or not they give you an MG, you should still get the distribution company to tell you what their projection is. And then if they don't come close to that projection in that period, there should be an automatic reversion, so that you have the rights to go to another place. If they completely fall flat, then that's a good way to get your rights back. So keep those terms short.
Just so I can understand that. So it's something like in the next 3 months, I expect to get X amount of revenue. And if you fall, further than
Well, I
10% away
wouldn't I
from
wouldn't hold
that.
them to that. I think that term is too short. Remember, they're asking for 10 years, and I'm suggesting that instead of 10 years, you say, look, this will be a 2-year term. Hit this performance benchmark, and I will give you an extension of X number of years. Maybe it's 8 years, but
Uh,
they have to have their feet to the fire first. There should be a performance benchmark, and if not, then the rights come back to you, and the dollars through the sub distributors, they get assigned to you as well, and then you can go do a deal with a third party.
oh, good. So it's less about it's a more optimistic way of putting it. Instead of in case you fall short, it's if you meet these goals, if you meet these projections, which you've set, which you've given to me, that you think you can meet, then we're good and you can have my film for longer. But if you don't,
Right, you fall flat, you
yeah.
don't perform. And remember, a lot of these companies have a lot of films, and there's a bit of a romance that goes on at the time where we both know that if they want your film, they'll tell you. Distributors, can tell you, can paint you a very promising picture, and if they really fall flat, you should have the option to terminate that deal. Another thing one should do is reserve the rights. Every distributor has its strength and deficits. And if they don't do non-theatrical or education, you should reserve those rights and do those deals on your own.
Do you find when asking those things, there's a trade-off? So if you say, I want to pull out my education and like impact community screenings, do they then counter with a lower MG or minimum guarantee or longer licensing window?
Um, sometimes they can, but there are so many distribution relationships where they're not offering an MG. Instead, they're offering to put dollars into marketing, and that's another thing that you want to be able to sign off on how they spend the marketing, so the marketing budget, and you also want to limit the distribution and marketing expenses. You want to put a cap on that
Mm.
because you don't want runaway expenses. You don't want a $20,000 trailer, and then they're really acting as a bank. It comes out of your pocket eventually, and you'll never recoup if there is no cap or management on the of the expenses.
Yep, that makes sense. If marketing costs, it's yeah, you can make $100,000 in digital sales, but if $100,000 was spent on marketing, you're still netting out at zero.
Yeah. And as we referenced before, if there's a material breach, there has to be a reversion of rights, a termination and reversion of the rights and the materials that come to you. Another area where we see challenges is where the distribution company insists on their right to bundle your film with other films, and then they will cross collateralize often your expenses or your gains against another film's losses within that package. Like, how can you really
Oh,
understand? First of all, the package you don't want to be packaged with, or if your film's a thoroughbred, you don't want to be put in with films of much less caliber. So your ability to approve that package is really important. You don't want to be passive as they go off and package your film. You want to make sure that the other titles are suitable, and that your gains are going to be used to offset the losses of the other films. So that's another. You'd like to stop against cross collateralization of expenses, and if possible. But if they are insisting in packaging, which is a very important aspect of the business, you really want approvals over the films and how those films are collateralized.
wow. I had not even heard of that. So yeah, I would have totally missed that entirely if I was negotiating a film. All right, we have to wrap up soon, but are there any other bits of this has been so incredibly generous to share all of this knowledge and mistakes to avoid and traps not to fall in?
I think approvals over the artwork, approvals over the distribution date, making sure that they can't change the title on you, which you want to do. A filmmaker spends and a producers, they spend so much time creating and having that kind of autonomy. They don't want to get kicked out of the driver's seat and moved into the back seat or the trunk, and then they're passively watching on the curb as the car drives by. So making sure that you have at a minimum mutual approval on all the material deal points, especially the creative elements, is super important.
Well, okay, great. Again, thank you so much. Oh, how do we find you? How do we find you online? LinkedIn, email?
Yeah, email steven.beer@lewisbrisbois.com. Brisbois is Lewis, Lewis. Brisbois is BRISBOIS.com.
Oh, perfect. We'll put some of this in the show notes too. Again, I really appreciate your time and all of your guidance and expertise just here and in the past. So thank you so much. And that's our episode. Thank you to our special guest, our producer and editor, Ron Pissarro, and you, the filmmakers, creators, marketers, and distributors that are dedicated to connecting audiences with great films.